from bad to worse. It's just now trying to.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grace Notes with Yorktown Supervisor Michael Grace. I'm Bruce A. Parr of Chase Media Group. And before we get started, we'd just like to very quickly run down that in the next few weeks, some of the events you'll want to know about. June 2nd is the Yorktown Chamber of Commerce Auto Show at the Jefferson Valley Mall. There's going to be 50 new cars, 2012, 2013 cars on display. And then the Chamber, 2 days later on June 4th, has its golf outing at the Salem Country Club. June 8th is the Yorktown Relay for Life, American Cancer Society. The Lions Club starts its summer concerts June 17th at the Gazebo at DeVito Field with Desert Highway. And then June 20th through the 24th, one of the most popular events every year in Yorktown is the Yorktown Heights Engine Company #1 Parade and Carnival. And, of course, the parade is on Wednesday the 20th, and then the carnival runs that day through Sunday. So, obviously, a lot of things, Supervisor.
Yeah, we should also mention that last weekend was the debut of the Yorktown Farmers Market. Absolutely beautiful day, and it all went very well. And just to remind everybody that that will be in place every Saturday until October,
right,
except for 1 or 2 Saturdays here or there.
From 9 a.m.
to 2, I think.
2, yeah.
And it was great. We had the Teen Center provide entertainment. And I guess with the Fireman's Carnival, they won't be there. I guess that's
one of the
Saturdays,
right.
And then maybe one Saturday in August.
Right.
But it was great. A lot of nice produce. So I encourage everybody to make a visit. And it's just going to get better. It really was a fantastic afternoon.
Yes.
So
yeah, they did a great. Karen Mundell and Ed Mundell, her husband, did a great job in putting that together. With Marty McGannon was involved in that.
And then we had on Sunday there was talk about car shows. There was a classic car show with Richie Russo down at
yes,
East Coast Customs.
Yeah, right.
To benefit the St. Jude's Hospital, and that was a very nice event as well.
Yeah, he always does a good job. Yeah. And we want to introduce, of course, our guest on the show, Frank Reale, who is president of Influence Peers Partnership. Frank, maybe you just want to quickly explain what your mission is.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here in Yorktown. The mission. We work with young people on creating media messages about the issues that they're most concerned about. And we work with kids on issues like domestic violence, dating violence, drug and alcohol abuse, depression, bullying, all kinds of issues. And what they do all year is they work on these projects, and we produce public service announcements. But the most thing we're most proud about is the annual film that we produce. It's a 1-hour program. And we air it all across the country. This past May 17th, as a matter of fact, the program that we did this past year, Fine Lines, was put up on a satellite feed and distributed by videotape and also by webcasting to potentially 65 million homes. It will be aired on cable public access channels, public broadcasting stations, in schools, colleges all across the country in all 50 states.
No, that's great.
And the latest film, what's the topic on the latest film?
Well, the latest film, we'd like to think that this is probably the best effort we've ever had. It's got the highest production value. We spent more money on it, but still we have a very low budget, under $10,000 for the film. But this particular film is an original screenplay written by a recent high school graduate, and it's concerning a young girl who is addicted to Vicodin. She has a very serious problem. Interestingly enough, her best friend growing up, they grew up as children, they were next door neighbors, was Benjamin. Now, Benjamin suffers from a high order, or a low order, well, higher on the scale, a spectrum of autism. And part of the storyline deals with the relationship that they have as friends and how her Vicodin affects Benjamin's life.
It's in terms of actual for students or other people to get involved in your program. Is there any access to that?
Absolutely. We pride ourselves in the fact that every aspect of this production, the kids are involved in. High school kids, college students are involved in every part of the production. They're involved in the editing, the marketing, the distribution, the screenplay writing. The student wrote the screenplay, directing, every part of it. Lights, sounds, cameras. As a matter of fact, some of our students that are involved are autistic, and they were actively involved in the project. So anyone that has an interest is invited to join us. We've had students from all the local school districts. And one of the things we do is we travel across the country, and when we do our documentary work, we've been involved with students all across the country. So we invite anyone to join our group if they're interested in the topic, whether it's drug and alcohol abuse prevention, dating violence, or if they're interested in just producing films, being behind the scenes, or if they're interested in acting, being in front of the camera.
Before the show, I was talking to Bruce about a conversation I had with the superintendent of schools here in Yorktown, and part of the conversation was and it's interesting. I think we'll do a show, and hopefully a little bit longer one, and actually maybe something that you may be interested to come to, because I think we'll try to get an audience as well. But we were talking about the major investment that the school districts are now making in having psychologists, psychiatrists on staff, and providing the programs for the issues facing the current population of teenagers. And it's kind of interesting from his point of view, because he's been an educator for decades. I think it's I don't want to date him, but I think it's
years, right?
And he was telling me about when he was first educated, there was 50 students in a classroom, and it wasn't any of these problems, and the teachers would take a direct interest in the students. But what his real point was that there was a lot of the institutions outside of the schools were stronger, your faith-based institutions, essentially, and the different societal norms and mores, that basically this wasn't a huge problem in decades ago, and that now what's happened is that the shepherding of the kids out in that age group has now fallen onto the school districts.
It's true.
And surprisingly, the amount of money that is spent in providing these services,
Right.
which are overtaxed even. I mean, the services being provided by the school are strained because there's such a high demand for them, but they spend millions and millions of dollars on these types of services. And what was interesting about it is because we had, starting in Yorktown, what we're doing is like a community outreach program and initiative, really reaching out to the civic, charitable, faith-based, and military organizations in town to try to strengthen them. And even in the discussion that we've had, which we now have had 3 meetings.
Yes.
And the first one were very broad, but we're narrowing it down, and we're getting all these different groups involved. And it's really fascinating to see what's coming out of the mix. And what's really coming out of the mix is we're starting to identify a segment of the population that is really at high risk.
Mm-hmm.
And that segment of the population at high risk ends up being really the post-high school graduates and young adults and 20-somethings. And we've experienced in our own community, we've had a lot of very tragic deaths and suicides in that age group in Yorktown over the last a couple of years. And what really was fascinating about it is that, and it was very important for me, is being in the local government, and I think even for the school districts, is looking at where we're allocating our resources. We allocate a lot of resources to grade school kids because we have the sports programs. We have great sport programs around here, YAC, Shrobo Athletic Club, Yorktown Youth Soccer Club, and what's actually remarkable about those groups is that they're actually providing that kind of counseling as well, right? I mean, right? Rich Campanaro was saying in one of these groups that they have their own anti-drug education
speakers, right?
education programs.
Right.
So there's a huge,
That's a coalition, and the coalition model, which is being used all across the country, which involves bringing the faith-based organizations, the youth-based organizations, the businesses, the schools, the governments, bringing them all together to address the issues that face our kids. Our kids live in a very complicated world, and their problems are very complicated. And then those kinds of problems are not very easily solved by their parents. They need professional people to deal with them. This is a complex society we live in, and it's difficult for them to navigate through that complexity. Yeah. So we need their support. Well, the coalition, matter of fact, is an organization, the Community of Anti-Coalitions, Community of Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. And, and the research has said that that's what you need to have. You need to have all the pieces put together to provide the support that our children need.
And what I find fascinating about it is that it's and my discussion with him is one of the things is that when you talk about parents and their effectiveness, even in bringing up their kids, is such a headwind in terms of the culture, the subculture that exists, that it can be very difficult. And then you also have layered on top of this a lot of the political, what I call a lot of the political correctness, which mutes some of the faith-based mores that are being taught at home, because and with the combination of these things, sometimes even the home parental guidance is undermined by the institutions in terms of teaching tolerance or whatever the political correctness of the time is. And what's happening on a very tangible level is that it's an enormous expense to the community, either it be through the school having to spend millions of dollars on programs, or in the municipalities having the consequences of having to deal with the expenses of the consequences of not having something in place. But I find it absolutely fascinating because as a town official, we do again allocate resources for the young grade schools. What happens after grade school, a lot of those programs give way to the high school, and where the burden falls on the high school, and then we go from that group to our seniors, and we just leapfrog over this other segment of the population, which is either college kids or post.
Half of them can't find jobs.
Right.
So there's that whole level of depression that they may be suffering because they've gone to school, they have thousands and thousands of dollars of tuition burdens that they have to pay off. They can't find a job. They feel as if they're a failure because they're not able to do that, and it's not their fault at all. So you're absolutely correct. There's a whole population that needs to be addressed. As a matter of fact, in this film, a number of the students that are in this film are those who graduated from high school. In our 20th anniversary film, we are going to, which is in 2 years, we're going to make a film about the 20-somethings, not about high school kids, but we're going to make a film about the 20-somethings and invite kids who have been involved in our program in the past to participate in it. So it's right along the target of what.
And again, it really has been a fascinating experience, because in these meetings that we've had, and a lot of the groups are geared towards certain curing of certain disease, cancers. We have Relay for Life, we have Support Connection. We have other groups that just do charitable work, like Love in Action and Yorktown Love in Action. But really, what's been fascinating is to see that after all the discussions of all the different areas where these civic and charitable groups reach out, there's this gaping hole in them, which and we actually started with the idea that trying to get the 20-something crowd involved in these organizations, because we feel that a lot of them are able-bodied and they have a lot of imagination and they bring a lot of energy, and it would be great to match them up with some of these groups to get them involved in the community and get involved in the passion that these people have for whatever specific charity they have. And what we're really finding is that is a neglected bunch, and I think it's a critical that we start to recognize that and start to put things into place where we can reach out to them. The other thing, in terms of your particular movie here, we were with ASK, which is the Alliance for Safe Kids, which does a lot of anti-bullying, education. And they had a forum not long ago where they told us the results of surveys they have done for kids within our school districts, which is Lakeland and Yorktown, and they're following. It's really pretty cool that they're following a group of students.
Cohorts.
Yeah, they're going through every 2 years, and
That's the Communities That Care Communities That Care survey. Is that what they're using? There's a
you
number
know,
of surveys out
It was
there.
done through
Yeah.
the Student Assistance Services of the
Okay,
school
yeah.
districts.
what's I mean, just you see that what you would expect in terms of trends as the older the group gets, the more experimenting they've done with drugs, or the more they've used drugs, the higher percent, and they look at these our local trends and comparing them to the national trends.
That's one of the reasons why we pick prescription drugs, as a matter of fact, is because that's becoming a major issue. Kids seem to think that it's safe because, you know, they're made in a pharmaceutical company where you can get them in a drugstore. You don't buy them necessarily from the guy in the street. You know, you get them from your parents' cabinet, so they think they're kind of safe. And the reality is they're just as dangerous as heroin, just as dangerous as some of the others. It's interesting, and if you have a moment, maybe we could take a look at the trailer for the
Yeah,
film.
yeah. There's a trailer that we're going to show now. So just take a look at this. Okay. Yeah. So Frank, will you want to comment on what we just saw?
Well, yeah, but you could see that that in the trailer we're looking at a situation where it's kind of leads you to some place and really doesn't tell you what the film is about, but sparks your interest. And as a matter of fact, that's the comments we've got when we shared it on YouTube, is that, what is this about? It certainly seems interesting. Trying to draw the audience to it. But what it is about a young girl who's suffering from a Vicodin addiction and the consequences that her addiction has on her best friend who's autistic and her family. So it's a very powerful message.
It's interesting because even out of that Ask survey, which one of the things I found remarkable was that you're exactly right. It's the Oxycontins, the Vicodins, it's the prescription drugs which are becoming the drugs of choice.
Yeah.
And the thing is that
Easy to get.
Yeah.
and they're extremely dangerous. I mean, especially the OxyContin and the Vicodin. I mean, they're something that you really don't. I mean, you're creating a very addictive situation for these kids.
We were fortunate a couple of years ago to actually conduct an interview with Dr. Nora Volkow. She's the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and she's probably one of the premier experts. And it's amazing the kind of research that's going into it, the imaging that they're doing of the brain and what it affects the drug use has on the brain. She, as a matter of fact, the DVD that we have available includes that, the Fine Lines DVD actually includes a link to watching that documentary.
Well, they have a. I know I'm very familiar with it. There's the Amen clinics, which is a clinic out in California and one I think in Virginia, and he has a lot of different programs. But one of his programs is doing these scans. What they do is do scans on the brain
Yep.
of uptake, blood uptake in certain portions of the brain.
Right.
And he actually started off with studying criminal populations, and in terms of making diagnosis for mental illness. And it's really remarkable the effects of the drugs that have on the neurology of the brain. I mean,
with research that they've done and the technology that they have now, the information they've been able to gather in the last 5 to 10 years is just remarkable. They know so much more about drug addiction, what causes it, and how it affects the enzymes in the brain, and how it affects dopamine and serotonin in the brain, and all kinds of issues like that. So it's just amazing.
but I'm going to tell you, my opinion is it's always an uphill battle until you start to deal with some of the problems that precipitate the desire to actually go there.
Right.
And the thing is that a lot of the culture preaches for an unstructured lifestyle for kids in that age group. they're taught they have the sexual mores, or it's all loose, it's all everything, anything goes. The kids really don't have the judgment or the ability, or the emotional maturity to handle those issues. And the thing is, it used to be, we kept very rigid lines for the kids to be in, which was good, because they really need to to be within the lines, or kept within the lines, until they're old enough emotionally to have the judgment to make decisions, which they're going to end up having. We all have to make in our lives at some point in time, but hopefully by then we've matured to be able to do it and to emotionally handle it. But the culture that they're dealt, and the culture that they're preached, is everything goes and anything can go, and it's all mixed up messages. It's wear a condom but don't smoke cigarettes. It's it's all over the place, and there isn't any consistent, what I think is consistent mores for them to follow, and kids don't want to be left to their own devices.
They don't
at that age. And what happens is, which was remarkable when you talk to the superintendent of schools, what we've replaced all the faith-based or family-based institutions with, we've done it with having the school spend millions and millions of dollars on psychiatrists and psychologists in order to address what these kids are dealing with. And like you said, it's a very, very difficult age for them, and it's made even more difficult by the fact that we allowed them a certain amount of discretion or freedom, which they just can't handle, I don't think.
Well, Frank, do you have, to that point, are there like success stories from your organization?
Yes, we do. We have a few that. Well, I'll talk about one. A young man from Brooklyn, actually, that was in our program. It was in 2001. I get a phone call from a friend of ours, mutual friend. Her girlfriend's son was a freshman in high school in Brooklyn, and was failing all his subjects. And she was very concerned, because he wasn't sure whether he was going to be a gangster or he was going to be a student. It was on the fence. So she said, do you have anything? Do you know of any programs that my son can be involved in? Because I'm really, really concerned. Well, she contacted me and she said, Frank, what do you think? So we're going to California. Why don't you have him come along? We got funding from Derek Jeter's foundation, the Turn 2 Foundation. And I contacted his dad, who runs the foundation. I said, listen, we have some kids from Brooklyn, 3 as a matter of fact. One of them, this kid, Danny. Think you can up our funding for this year? I said, absolutely. So he gave us an additional $5,000. So we went to California. It was kind of neat. We had 13 kids. We spent 9 days. We rented a motorhome and a van, traveled up and down the coast of California, interviewing kids in rehab programs, interviewing kids that are doing prevention programs. Danny came along. He was the youngest at 14 years old, had never done anything on film before, had never flown in a plane, didn't know how to swim, and yet we brought him he had surfing lessons, because we had all the kids do surfing lessons. And so we had him just, coil cables, and he was very quiet, didn't say 2 words the whole time he was there, just kind of went along with the flow. Hold a boom pole, and then we had him conduct an interview. Now, the last day we were in California, we had a debriefing session. We asked each of the kids, well, what is it that you liked, and what is it that you didn't like about the project we just finished? And everybody had their turn. When Danny's turn came, he talked for about 10, 15 minutes. And he hadn't said 10 words. He said he felt like he was a member of the family, that this was the most exciting thing he's ever done, and that even though he couldn't swim, he could now surf. And he said he couldn't wait to get back to Brooklyn, because he was going to become a documentary filmmaker.
Wow.
So I say, kid's going to go back to Brooklyn. He's going to hook up with his friends. He's documentary filmmaker ain't going to happen. So what he's probably going to do, we hope, at least his grades will improve. That's what our hope was. That was our plan. But he goes back to Brooklyn, and he does become a documentary filmmaker. And as a matter of fact, he did a documentary on growing up in Brooklyn, and he won a Youth Emmy Award.
Wow. Oh, wow.
He gets a scholarship because of that to do a documentary on growing up in Thailand. Gets nominated for another Youth Emmy Award. In the time, by the way, his grades improved dramatically. And in the summer between his junior and senior year, decides to do a documentary on the violence that's in Brooklyn. And during the process of his documentary, one of his best friends was shot and killed accidentally by a police officer. Bullets in the Hood, A Bed-Stuy Story was the documentary. It was submitted to the San Francisco Black Filmmakers Festival and won an award. The UN Film Festival, the Youth Film Festival, won an award. Tribeca Film Festival won an award. Bullets in the Hood, A Bed-Stuy Story was submitted to the Sundance Film Festival and won the jury award. And it was considered for an Academy Award nomination for Best Short Documentary. Now, this is a young man who did not even graduate high school, but when he did graduate high school, he graduated valedictorian, got a full ride to Clafton University, and is now working for NBC.
What a story.
Yeah,
They should make that into a movie.
yeah. No, but you know, I think that's that's one of the things we're looking to achieve even on a local level.
Yes,
is
right,
to,
absolutely.
is just to start to and with our outreach group, we have a lot of different organizations that can almost satisfy any passion that you may have. From the if you want to do physical work, if you want to do environmental work.
You know, you say that because that just reminds me of a statement that a kid from Syracuse, when we went to in 1990 something, we did a documentary. We interviewed some kids in Syracuse, and this kid, 60 years old, he said that all you need to do is to find that passion in your life.
Absolutely.
And everything else will play out okay.
And that it's hooking up, and all these kids have it. I don't care. You know what? I don't care who it is. I don't care how much they've gone down a wrong road at some point in time. Every kid's got that passion, and if you can just hook them up, give them the opportunity to exercise that passion, you start to get the problem licked. And
there's a lot more Dannys in this world.
Yeah. And it's so important. And I'd love to have you. I don't know how much more time we have. I'm gonna love to have you back. I think when we get the superintendent here,
we should,
and I'd love to have this ongoing discussion. It's too short for a half an hour, but it really what's important for me in my position, because this is supposedly the supervisor's show, so I've got to make it relative to what I do, but it is very relative to what I do, because it's a matter of not only educating the public, but taking a look at what policy decisions we have to make in terms of the allocation of our resources and where we can plug. And I think it's an extremely important thing to identify that population and to create opportunities for them to fulfill their passions.
Yep.
And we have great stuff. We have this volunteer ambulance. We have now this citizens emergency response team. We have seniors that need transportation. We have all sorts of fires. We have all these, and it's just a matter of just saying, pulling these people out and saying, look, you need to be part of your community, and we need you to be part of our community. It's both things. We need you. We want your able-bodied. Your spirit, your youthful energy. The community needs all of that.
Absolutely.
And they need to feel that they can be, fulfill some of their passions. And it's not just a matter of that I make a living. It's not just that I make, because we all have our jobs, but our jobs, if they match up to our passions, that's great. But sometimes you need both.
Now, I've been in education as a teacher and a school board member for 40 years. And I have to tell you, in 40 years, that one thing you can be sure of, you give the kids an opportunity, you give them motivation, and they'll go through brick walls for you.
Right.
All you need to do is connect them. Right.
Well, it's funny because we always have this discussion. Why do they draft kids at 18? Because that's what they that's exactly them. If you can corral them, you can train them, they'll run through brick walls for you. Yep. And that's exactly it. And we all know that that youthful exuberance, we at our age we try to find it and hold on to it and dig it up wherever we can, but they have it in spades. Yes. And the thing is, it's just a matter of giving them the direction. And the thing is we really have to do it on a much larger scale, because we don't want one Danny, we want 1,000 Dannies.
That's right.
Yep. And there is no reason in a country such as ours that has the wealth and has the, and should be able to provide the opportunity, that it doesn't. And especially when bad economic times, it's actually, it actually is, you have a lot of idle, out of work kids, or kids that really are losing hope, or they lose self-esteem, as you said.
And it's not just the school's job. It's
No.
the community's job. It's the fire department's job. It's the police department. It's the town government. It's the ambulance corps. It's the businesses. It's everybody's job.
Yeah, and you're so right on that. And I'm going to tell you, one of the first meetings we had in the community outreach, there was discussion about the schools. We invited the schools in because everybody kind of wanted to know what they're doing about it. And there was some discussion about, you need to do more. You need to do more. And I think the superintendent was taken back a little bit because he's saying, I didn't want to do it there, but I want to explain to him what it is that we do, and how much we spend, and how much of our resources we allocate towards these problems. And I told him, well, you need to educate the public on that, because what's happening, we've also gotten to this way of thinking that we'll let the school take care of that. We push the problems off to them and say that, now why aren't you taking care of it? We have this problem, why aren't you taking care of it? And it's not the proper place for it to be taken care of.
They're a big piece of the puzzle.
Right.
But they're not the only piece.
No, but they on their own, solely on their own, they can only have a limited effectiveness.
Very limited. That's true. It's true.
And so and you don't want to get, there's a lot of anti-bullying education, there's a lot of anti-drug education, but it's still, these kids are smart enough, and you don't want them to become cynical about things, because a lot of that education doesn't match up with what their issues are, what their real, what ails them, and so. It's kind of funny. I think you really, it's not a difficult task, but it's focusing on.
You bring up a very good point, because what we try to do with the Peers Influence Peers program is we let them drive the direction we want the film to go. So they tell us, and we kind of guide them in a bit, and we say, listen, research says this, research says this. And they said, well, we really want to deal with this. We really want to deal with cyberbullying, I think, is the direction we may be going next year. So what we'll do is we'll have them work all summer on doing the research, find out more information about it, come up with the scripts, decide on who we're going to interview, decide on who's going to write the screenplay, so that they work on it all year long. But they drive it, so there's an ownership. Now, maybe some of the students didn't write the script, but they're holding a boom pole, so there's an ownership. They're a piece of the puzzle. And that's what's critical. They have to have ownership.
It's also, we had Mildred Strang Middle School had their Grace Foundation awards last night, and the point, at least for kids that just have done the right thing, the recognition for having done a good deed, or having done the right thing, and a lot of it is, for them, is, in order to do that, they have to if you're passionate about something, it's great, but it's also having courage to buck the culture that they're in. Yeah. And that's, what, actually doing the right thing, and being a leader, and stepping out of the box, and giving this to your own the culture that this milieu that they're in, takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And they need that support to do it. And you're right. If you empower them in the right direction, I think you can produce beautiful things and beautiful results, and I think that's a lot of because these kids, there's no kid out there that's looking to become addicted to OxyContin or Vicodin or anything else. I mean, there's no parent that's looking to have their kid go down this road. I mean, it's when you deal with families that deal with these problems in their households, it's devastating.
We had an opportunity to meet with Partnership for Drug-Free America, and there's a gentleman there who's no longer with them. A few years ago, Dr. Herb Kleber, and he'd been in the field of recovery and for alcoholism for many years. And he said, over the 30 years that he was in the industry, he could count on one hand the number of people that started out drinking that wanted to become alcoholics.
right,
Nobody wants
Right.
to become an
Well, they're
alcoholic.
trying to escape
But
from
it-
something else, right?
right.
That's what it is.
But it's, I liken it to, what gives you courage to do things is having a certain amount of faith in something bigger than yourself, and faith in yourself. And it's really an important thing. And to me, it's always, I look at it as that population that's always, that starts off, that young, late teens or early 20s, they are, they make good warriors. And it's a matter of giving them something to be warriors about.
Right.
And because they do. I mean, they have great, energy and drive, and it's really up to us as, in government, school districts, or whatever it is, like you said, really across the spectrum, to start to provide, the opportunities for them to really.
That's a good line. I like that.
What's that?
Take that one.
I
Have
think
faith in something bigger than yourself, and have faith in yourself.
Yeah,
That was
but
good.
it's really it's the truth, because I liken it to, look, if you have faith, I mean, that's the idea of jumping off mountains, and
Right, right.
and that's really, to be successful in life, that's what you have to do. Funny, we went to the Circular Da Vinci annual awards, and there's a Yorktown guy, and he's works for Fox News. He's I forget his name, embarrassing, but he's one of these.
Sal, was it Sal? I know who you mean, though. Yes, right.
But he was telling about it. He's sort of this like middle class, blue collar kid who was a boxer, who's kind of just made his way right up to the. He's interviewing Gates and Zuckerberg and all these other guys, and he's really made it. And he says, I gotta give you advice to it was, again, there was some high school kids that were getting scholarships from the Circular Da Vinci. And he says, I got advice I can give you is the same advice my grandmother, I think his grandmother used to give to other people. And it was like, and his point is that you have to, you can't, the convention sort of boxes you in and tells you what you can't do or what you're not able to do, and always gives you the downside risk of something, and it mutes people's passions. It really does. And the thing is that the people that really make it, like the Zuckerberg, they sit there. The guy's got to, thinks outside the box and has the courage to do it. Well, what's the basis of courage? Is having a faith that you can venture. And you're still cradled and you're still protected, because
Right.
That's the whole. You can and with faith you can you can move mountains, and you really can. But it's understanding that being taking risks and trusting in yourself, and not being that and trusting in that there's a higher purpose. to
But
it.
people like that, who do achieve extraordinary success, I think will tell you that the biggest favor you could do them is to say you can't do that. Right. That's what. Because they want to prove you're wrong.
Right, and it's really it's having strength and courage to do it, and that is, so and it comes full circles back to it. Those values, that the understanding of just having that sense of faith about things, is I think has sometimes has been undermined by our institutions, because that's the one thing the kids are told not to have.
Right.
In a really odd way.
Right.
Then you're not to have faith, and they're all made to be drones to this kind of pop culture.
Right.
And the kids all make fun of it. You have movies like The Matrix or these other movies where they're all mindless drones, but that's what they think in their liberalism they're anything but that. But they're everything. That's exactly what they become.
Are. Yes. Yeah.
They just follow they just have to follow the stupid culture, the subculture that they're in, no matter what. They all got to dress with the baggy pants, or they all got to conform, and you think that look, I'm not conforming, I'm on my own.
But
no,
they are.
Right.
And the irony in it is that the kids that end up breaking out is like your Danny, your kid. What does he got to have? He's got to find it in himself, and then say, what, I'm not stuck in my Bed-Stuy culture. I don't have to, I can step out of this. I can be I can, yeah, I can have, you know, I can have the courage to say, you know, no. I can have the courage to say, I believe in myself. I can have the, no matter who wants to knock me down. I'm sure there's a lot of peers that say, oh, come on, what are you kidding me? You know?
It's interesting. I got a phone call 4 years after Danny did that documentary. His mother was at the commencement exercises at Clafton University, and she called me from the stands to tell me that her son had just graduated magna cum laude.
Wow. Yeah, that's something.
No,
Well,
it's beautiful. So, and you know, it's you know, it's great when they do great things, but it's you know, even when they do little things great, it's a
Yeah.
great thing.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
what-
another good line. I like that.
well, we're going to have to wrap it up, and we'll have some more great lines for next time, I think. But,
You
but,
you
yeah,
know, when
you
we
should
have,
come back, Frank, yeah.
we have to come back, and you know, I think
Sure.
because you have a
Yeah.
fascinating perspective on things. That's
Thank you.
it's very valuable to hear.
Yeah, and quickly, Frank, is this DVD? Well, we saw the trailer of Fine Lines. Is it available? Is it for
Yes,
sale?
you can. Yes, you can get the DVD, which also includes the interview with Dr. Volkow, and you
Right.
can buy them on Amazon. If you just put Peers Partnership, you can get to our store on Amazon.com and you can purchase it there.
And what's the website for you?
The website is peerspartnership.org.
Okay, great.
And that's PEERS.
Yeah,
partnership.
PEERS, that's right, Peers Partnership. Well, this has been not only interesting and informative, but I think very important. You know, it's been a very important show. Thanks for being on the Supervisor Show.
Yeah, thanks for taking the
We've
time.
been
Really
with
appreciate it.
Frank Reale has been our guest, who's president of Peers Influence Peers Partnership. And this has been Grace Notes with Yorktown Supervisor Michael Grace. I'm your host, Bruce Saper of Chase Media Group. Thanks for watching us, and be sure to watch us next time and every time, because Yorktown is your town. Thank you.